most people's fears about AI are just fear about corporations. And every paperclip maximizer thought experiment that people are freaked out about is already happening right now. We already have corporations that are paperclip maximizers. That's great, but keep your options open. I hate that phrase so much. Keep your options open. I'm like, what are you saying? All the options, even the option to turn my customers into Soylent Green and eat them? You said before it was too early. Now it's too late. Was it ever the right time? Guess what? It's never the effing right time. There's no right time. It's always too early, then it's too late. I really do not think people that are operating in this sociopathic shareholder maximizing, like, do whatever you take to make money. Those people should not be deploying AI agents. It's so dangerous. You can't even imagine the harm you could do.
Hey, thanks for tuning into another episode of the Chief AI Officer Show. Today, I'm really excited to bring you Eric Ries. Eric Ries is the co-founder of Answer.AI. He is the author of The Lean Startup, which is a pretty legendary book in the startup space. He's been in and around startups and scale-ups for a long time, and he has a new book coming out, Incorruptible, that we'll talk about today, along with a lot of other things related to AI, governance, startups, scale-ups. Eric, so excited to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. We're very glad to be here.
Before we get started, you obviously, you wrote The Lean Startup a while ago now. It's kind of canonical in the startup space. You've kind of shifted your focus a little bit in your latest work to focus on governance and scale-ups. Can you talk to me just a little bit about that evolution and how you see the connection between those things?
Sure, yeah. It's actually very natural to me because if you're giving people startup advice, if it's any good, pretty soon you're going to have to deal with scale-ups. It's like pretty soon companies are going to get a lot larger. So actually, like, the enterprise side of Lean Startup is more my last book because, it's funny, for people in the kind of corporate innovation space, they know me for the red book more than the blue book. I wrote a book called The Startup Way, as a red cover. It's really about the enterprise side of innovation and how to create organizations that can stay dynamic as they scale. This new book, I don't know that I would agree that is really more scale-up focused because, yes, there's a lot of case studies in the book of companies that became large, but they were all startups once. And in order to tell the story of what's been going on in our economy for the last couple hundred years, we had to talk about some of these long-lived companies. So I get that. I get it had that impression. But to me, the questions of governance and whether you're mission-driven or just merely mission-hopeful, whether your company's going to fall to corruption or not, those are urgent questions at every stage. And I personally think there is relevance for, like, startup founders in a garage, but also for, like, pretty much every employee, leader, C-suite person, board member, and even every one of us as a customer or even as an investor. We all have this gravitational power to see our values enacted in the world or betrayed. And a big part of my goal in writing this book was to give all of us the tools we need to wield that power effectively.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get into those things. It's a topic on a lot of people's minds recently right now. Obviously, when this episode gets published, it'll be later on, and then the news travels fast. But you were involved in Anthropic's, establishment of the Long-Term Benefit Trust. There's a ton going on there lately with Anthropic and the Pentagon, which we'll get into later. But first, I really let's lean into that idea of what gets, as you have put in other places, surgically deboned from a
Yeah,
startup after they scale. What happens
sad.
to that mission?
It's really sad. I think I've watched a lot of people build companies, take them public, make unimaginable wealth, and I know a bunch of them who are miserable. And I just ask myself, what were all those compromises for? We tell ourselves that these necessary, we have to give up a little bit of ourselves, a little bit, we become a little bit less mission driven, or we make one compromise decision, or it's like a slippery slope. You're like, well, I can get away with it this time. No one will really know, or it'll be fine. And I think investors and lawyers and bankers and all these people that advise founders, they're always saying, you can always worry about that later. It's okay. I tell a story in the book of one founder I work with that was doing a financing round, and they really wanted their lawyers, their own lawyers, to put in the most employee favorable terms they could into their governing documents. And the lawyers kept changing them back to market standard because they just couldn't understand why anybody would do something they didn't have to. So they were like, I want to do right by my employees. So like, yeah, but you don't really, this isn't standard. They don't even know about this thing. You don't really need to do it, so why are you doing it? It's like, I'm not doing it because I have to do it. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I've just seen that over and over and over again, where companies begin idealistic, they have a clear ethos, and then they kind of lose it. And to the people who are in the process of losing it can feel like this mystery. So, for example, in the book, I spent a lot of time studying the essays that people write when they leave Google. But these are essays written by longtime Googlers, all of whom had been there more than 10 years. And Google's a great company, very successful company by all measures. And yet these posts, they're a little bit morose to read because for all the success that Google had, the people who were there at that time felt this sense of loss. Like something precious is being lost. The ethos of don't be evil has like gradually been eroded, corroded, I would say corrupted. And they don't know why. It's really the mystery of it is really what got my attention. They write about it. Everyone involved had such good intentions. They were so like they talk very approvingly of the leadership, of the culture, of everything about the company is positive, except despite everyone's best and efforts, it starts to become bureaucratic. It ceases to be able to innovate. It ceases to do things for the benefit of its customers. It starts to do things for the benefit of itself. In fact, one of the people wrote that decisions went from being made for the benefit of our customers to the benefit of Google and eventually to the benefit of whoever was making the decision. And that kind of selfishness, that kind of like sociopathic lack of concern with others, I think characterizes so many modern corporations. And yet, if you ask people about it, we're to live in a very cynical time. People will be like, it's just inevitable. Money gets involved, power gets, what are you going to do? And yet, if it was inevitable, there would be no exceptions. And part of why I wrote this book is there are these outlier companies that this doesn't seem to happen to. And so I wanted to understand the double mystery. Why does this happen in spite of people's best intentions? But why isn't it inevitable?
As a long ago in another life kind of political science major, it kind of reminds me of Weber's idea of bureaucracies and how they kind of then become, they just exist to propagate themselves and grow larger. I think there's so many interesting things there. Where do founders go wrong? Where does the governance structure go wrong? Are they ill-equipped in the early stages to set themselves up for success?
I think founders are being deceived, just straight up. So most founders, when I meet with them now, people used to call me to only talk about lean startup. But after a while, I'd worked at enough of these mission-driven companies, especially that became high profile. Think about, companies like Anthropic is so much in the news now. The word started to get around that if you have like a weird company, difficult company, mission-driven company, like Eric will help you. So people started coming to me with these really, really wacky stuff, really crazy. You can't imagine how crazy Anthropic seemed at the beginning, and companies like that. And so we would start to talk about these bigger picture questions about like, what is the future of this company really going to be? How should it be structured? How kind of culture should it have? And it's both an operational and a governance discipline. And I started asking people questions like, well, has anyone talked to you about your corporate governance yet? And the most common answer I get to this day by founders is my what? Huh? Like you have an incorporated company. Yeah. You have employees. You have investors. Yeah. You make products. You have revenue. And you don't know what your own constitution says. Like you should probably read it. You should probably know. So like for a lot of founders, I am the first person that's ever talked to them about it, more even than their own lawyer. They're like, well, my lawyer just told me I have the best practice documents. I'm like, yeah, but do you understand how insanely investor favorable those documents are? Do you know that according to the document, is this your signature right here on this document? This document says you'll have to sell this company to the highest bidder, no matter how evil they are, no matter how much you hate what they want to use your technology for. And they're like, oh, that can't be right. I'm like, call your lawyer right now. Just call him up and ask him if what I say is true. And they call me back and they're so upset. He betrayed me. I'm like, he didn't betray you. He thinks he's doing you a favor. That's the best practice. The dirty secret of today's best practices is that most of them are value destroying. And I say that not just because I don't like them, but because we have extensive academic and other evidence that they're terrible. So founders, I think, are being deceived. They're being misled by a set of best practices that are not serving their interests, that are just not really very good. So most of them, it's not that they're consciously choosing to put themselves into this structure where they become corrupt. It's just they don't know any better. And here's how it happens. You start a company, go to your lawyers. You're like, hey, I want to build this awesome company, change the world, mission driven, blah, 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 blah. Your lawyer's like, that's great, but keep your options open. I hate that phrase so much. Keep your options open. I'm like, What are you saying all the options, even the option to turn my customers into Soylent Green and eat them? Yeah, all your options. It'll maximize value that way. So don't worry about it. Everything you want to do, totally, you can always do that stuff later. Don't worry about it. Too early to worry about it now. Okay. So you get a standard Delaware C corp. You have no idea how it works. You have no idea what it says, but everything's fine. You raise some money. You have some investors who are like, hey, listen, I'm a mission driven company. Like, that's great. We love missionaries, not mercenaries. Okay, good. So anyway, I want to write the mission into the corporate charter. You don't need to do that. Don't worry about that kind of stuff. Just build leverage, create a great company. Then you'll have the power to be in charge to do whatever you want. Okay. Later stage company. You raise some more money, bring some more investors, some more lawyers, some bankers get involved, right? And it's like the bold contrarians on your board are like, listen, you don't want to be too different from other companies. You might not be able to raise money if you do that. Like, wow, what a bold contrarian you are. What great advice. Because unfortunately, investors have been trained that when you're winning the deal, you're all about mission. But as soon as you become a board member, poof. Now, mission is like a nice to have, like little dessert you get to have after you eat your vegetables, instead of the vital thing that made the company worth investing in the first place. So what are we doing here? You get close to the IPO, now you're in the growth stage. Now it's going great. Now you've brought on crossover investors, and now you really do have investment bankers, and you've brought in people. You have a professional CFO. You have a team whose job, they think their job is to, quote, land the plane, as if the IPO is the end of the road, not the beginning of your life as a public company, right? You see it in the word exit. Who's exiting? If it's you, you're planning to stay there for the rest of your life. It's not an exit for you. Your partners are exiting. They are abandoning you, and they're proud of it. Okay? You bring all these people on, and you're like, hey, man, whatever happened to that thing you told me was too early? Remember, I wanted to have like a community foundation, or I wanted to have like, employees be part of our governance, or I wanted to create broadly shared prosperity with our non-employee stakeholders, like all the people that use our product. I wanted to do this. Like, I have a long list of things I've always wanted to do. And they're like, oh, you were serious about that? Gosh, too bad. Now it's too late. Like, too late. We said before it was too early. Now it's too late. Was it ever the right time? Guess what? It's never the effing right time. There is no right time. It's always too early, then it's too late. And then you go public, and now it really is too late. The stats are that among venture-backed companies, Harvard Law School did a study, only 20% will still be CEO 3 years after an IPO. So this company's not you're not considered important anymore. You are being placated every step of the way. No one ever says no to what you wanna do. They just pat you on the head and be like, "Not now, not now, don't worry." And most founders are too cowardly and too ignorant to push back on this behavior and say, "Hold on, this doesn't make sense. I'm in charge of this company. It's my vision. It's my values. I wanna see those values encoded in the company. I wanna create what I call the, um, the infrastructure, the architecture of institutional longevity. I want to build a company that will still be here. My grandkids won't be embarrassed that I'm the person who founded it? And our system is not set up to do that. We feed these companies into a meat grinder, and we crank out their remains and use them, for fodder. And I think that's got to stop. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably resonates with a ton of founders and probably a ton of consumers who see the ills of what happens in corporate America
Of
and
course.
kind of the outcome of some of that greed. What are I mean, I have a ton of questions that come out of that, but first, what for you are some of the outliers or the lighthouse cases? I think, Meta famously an example of a founder who retained a ton of control vis-a-vis the board, but not necessarily enshrined amazing corporate governance for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, and in fact, I really recommend founders go back and reread the Facebook S1. It's incredible as a historical document now. It's a wild read because it's using the trappings of being mission driven. It's a very mission driven document. It says that we're gonna be long term, that we're gonna focus on the mission, that we don't make Facebook to make money, we make money to make more Facebook. But if you read through, you're like, "But what is the purpose of more Facebook?" It never says. It never says even once that we're gonna make the world a better place or leave our customers better off. It actually says, this is incredible to me. It says we are going to rewire. It uses the phrase rewire the relationship between citizens and their government, consumers and their companies, employees, and I think it's like people in their communities. It's three things like that. It's like a rule of three. And I was like, rewire. What an incredible phrase. Because there's no recognition that these are human beings whose lives are being affected. There's just the idea that we want to make Facebook to make more Facebook. So it's actually like a chilling. When I read it the first time, when it happened, I thought, what an inspiring document. And I read it now and I'm like, that is bone chilling to read, given that we know what happened next. So,
Yeah.
but so I'm not like Mr. Founder Control. You know, I'm not in favor of investor control or founder control. I think we need to build companies that are mission controlled and to
Mhm.
judge them based on the quality of that mission and whether it's worth preserving. What's interesting is that the outliers are all around us. The same people who tell me that corruption is inevitable whenever there's money involved, whenever companies scale, can all name an exception if I ask. So, for example, there was somebody telling me the other day that only family-run companies can have multi-generational, product, brand, all this stuff, because, like, the temptation to harvest what you've created is just too great. And they were naming company after company, Ford, Toyota, Mars, whatever, but, the Walton family. They were just, like, naming families one after the other. At the end of their rant, they were like, "Oh, and also Costco." I was like, "Excuse me, what?" They're like, "Yeah, for some reason, Costco is also immune to these forces. I don't really know why. They're not family run or anything, but" I'm like, "Isn't Costco a $400 billion public company? Surely, if it was inevitable, it would affect Costco, right?" They're like, "Yeah, I don't really know why." Anyway, like, we walk right by these outliers when, in fact, almost every person listening has, like, shopped at a Patagonia store or been to a Costco or eaten a Hershey chocolate bar. Like, we've taken Ozempic or a Novo Nordisk medicine. We've drank a Carlsberg beer. We've played with Legos. We've been in IKEA. Like, there's so many of these companies that just have these alternate structures that don't don't have the problem. Like, all of us are like, "There's this inevitable, impossible problem we're tearing our hair out how to solve," and then these other companies being like, "I don't know what you guys talking about. We're fine over here." And I'll tell you the first time I went to meet a company like this, I didn't know about this either. I was a founder. I was as ignorant as anybody. And because of Lean Startup, I got to travel the world and meet companies that I would never have otherwise met. And I got invited to give a talk for the executive team and the whole executive leadership team of a company in Denmark called Grundfos, and they make water pumps. So probably if you're running water wherever you are listening to this, there's probably a Grundfos water pump pumping it to you right now. So it's a company you benefit from every single day of your life and never heard of. And they're a private company, with billions in revenue, huge company. But they are owned by a nonprofit foundation because 3 generations ago, the original founder, he did not want to burden his children and grandparents. This is how they explained it to me. They said, "Look, he didn't want to burden his children and grandchildren with the requirement to run this company for the rest of their lives. And he also didn't want to sell it, and he didn't want to take it public. He didn't want to see it destroyed. So near the end of his life, he vested all his shares in this nonprofit foundation and tasked it with maintaining the integrity of the for-profit company, for the remaining for forever, in perpetuity, a permanent structure. And there are 12 trustees of the nonprofit, 4 members of his family, 4 employees of the company, and 4 outside experts. There's like a long list of criteria you have to qualify to be one of the outside experts on this board. And what's incredible, when I heard that, I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear this. You must be at such a big competitive disadvantage." And they looked at me like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, I mean, you're run by a nonprofit. You probably can't access global capital markets. You're probably not competitive. You're not efficient." I've been taught modern finance theory. It says this idea is incredibly stupid. Only the market can discipline companies. Only investors can be good stewards of financial capital. Like, that's the source of efficiency and all this stuff. And they were just like, "Oh, child, you are clueless. We would never trade places with any of our public competitors. We run circles around them because we're not doing the antics that they're doing. We can invest for the long term. We can invest countercyclically." They were just rattling off the benefits. I was like, "You really wouldn't trade places with people who follow best practices?" And they laughed out loud. Best practices. They just thought that was hilarious. So I was like, it was shocking to me. I was like, "Wait a minute, this company should not exist. This is impossible. I've been told this is impossible. What's up?" And it's funny, I still, I've been advocating for these ideas for many years. And I met someone just yesterday, big time consultant. And he was just like, "What you're saying is impossible. I learned it in business school." I was like, "Well, they may have like, did you learn that the Earth goes around the sun or the sun goes around the Earth? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you learned in business school. I have the data. I know what's true. So would you like to look at the data, or would you like to just believe your inherited business school orthodoxy?" He was like, "I'm pretty happy with my business school orthodoxy. Thank you very much." It's like, just wasn't interested in learning the truth because he already knows. He's already been taught. He's already been told. And I think that indoctrination is one of the most pernicious things that keeps founders trapped in this system where they continuously lose control of their company. They're like Frankenstein and his monster. And it's not always because investors take it away from you, by the way, although it often is. Brian Chesky spoke very eloquently about the feeling of losing control of his company to his employees because he followed these best practices. So I think one of the things we have to just be reflexively suspicious of is of this inherited body of best practices on both the operational and the structural side, neither of which are any good.
You make a very kind of structural argument. It's not necessarily an ethical argument, though I would say there's a lot of ethics tied to what you're trying to do, right? And
Of
like
course.
the goals that you're promoting, and I think you define profit in the book as like the maximizing of human flourishing, and things like this. Like we are, particularly in the US, indoctrinated to like a very free market capitalist approach. I don't think that what you're saying isn't that strong a contradiction to like that philosophy of capitalism necessarily. It feels like you're presenting an alternative governance structure like within that system. You're not saying the system is bad like writ large. You're saying like the way that we build companies within that system is bad. Is that a fair characterization, or like where are
Yeah,
the
yeah.
nuances in that argument for you?
I am the one. I'm the one creating the moral. I'm defending the moral logic of capitalism, and the people that
Mm,
purvey these best practices are destroying it.
yeah.
So, yeah, I have the right of the argument, not just empirically because it creates more value, but also just like if you look at this history of this system that we have inherited from our grandparents and our great grandparents, we've become very confused about ideas that they thought were very simple. And the idea, for example, that there are better and worse ways to make money is an ancient idea. Yes, Weber liked it a lot. He called it one of Aristotle's best ideas. Um, that the creation of new value, in which I capture a piece, I call this the builder's intuition, that is virtuous. There are a lot of other ways to make money that I don't think are. And in fact, in our grandparents' time and our great grandparents' time, many of the ways that we today celebrate of making money would have been seen as not just morally dubious, they would have been crimes. Stock buybacks were illegal until the 80s. Okay? So like before in the 19th century, if you said that your goal was to take a corporation and change its purpose from building a bridge to maximizing shareholder value, that would have been seen as a crime. The company's charter would have been voided by the courts. Okay? So this is a very recent, we've even taught this orthodoxy is incredibly recent. There are trees I can see out this window that are older than the idea of shareholder primacy. Okay? This is not some like ancient wisdom or like bedrock principle of capitalism. In fact, I think people who defend shareholder primacy are capitalism's most dangerous critics. They don't even realize it. And investors need to stop allowing people to run around speaking for them who do not have their interests at heart. I'll give you one very simple example. If you'll indulge me for a little bit of history.
Always.
Okay.
I'm a
Today's so today when you say I have a fiduciary duty to do something, people don't know what that means. They're like, "Oh, it must be something that involves money or something." Fiduciaries come to mean financial in most people's minds. But the word fiduciary doesn't mean financial. It means someone who is like a lawyer to his client, someone whose interests I have to put ahead of my own. And our modern idea of fiduciary duties, it comes from two different legal traditions. One is from trust law, where fiduciaries are trustees of the corporation. So the original idea, like in the 19th century, corporations were created to pursue some publicly beneficial purpose. If you couldn't name the beneficial purpose, you couldn't form the corporation. Trustees, the board of directors was seen as trustees of that mission. And then they had a very minor, but still real fiduciary duty that comes from agency law. They were also seen as having an agency relationship with the investors. Now, this was a negative duty. You needed to make sure that the investors were not defrauded because the point is they gave you money to pursue this mission. If the board were to pursue some other mission, that would be fraud, right? So over the course of the 19th and the 20th century, we had a succession of ideas. First one was called general incorporation. That was like fought state house by state house all across the 19th century. Delaware didn't adopt general incorporation until 1899. That's the key date to remember. In 1899, Delaware said, okay, anybody can form a corporation for any purpose, but not for no purpose. You still had to say what the purpose was. And certainly, if you wrote, my purpose is to maximize shareholder value, you would have been like, no. Still, that would have been like, absolutely not. Of course not. And they created this formulation that directors stand in fiduciary relationship to the corporation itself and to the stockholders. But the problem is that like those are two different ideas being merged together. So over the course of the 20th century, as financialization increased, the agency model came to dominate over the trust model. And by the time Milton Friedman was writing in the 70s that the purpose of a corporation is to maximize its profits, by the time the courts created what's called the Revlon Doctrine in the 80s, shareholder primacy became the law of the land. interestingly, never by any legislative action or popular referendum. So next time tells you that someone tells you shareholder primacy is just the law, you could be like, on what basis? It has zero, absolutely zero democratic legitimacy. It was enacted by a totally tiny cabal of lawyers, judges, and academics in the 70s and 80s. It is a civilization level wrong turn. We just have to undo. Anyway, here's a really interesting bit. We've built fiduciary duties now are maximizing duties. Trust duties are about preservation, but agencies are about max. If I send you to the market as my agent to get me the best price, you can't just get me a good price. You have to get me the best price you can. If you're my lawyer, you have to zealously represent me to the best of your ability. You can't just do a half-assed job. That's your duty, right? What people seem to have forgotten is that what investors prize most of all, if you ask an investor, what's the most important governance protection in our whole civilization, they will tell you limited liability. It's actually like a brilliant breakthrough technology, the idea that people should be able to invest in a company and not be responsible for everything that it does. If you had to be responsible for everything that every company you invested in do, you wouldn't invest in many companies. It'd just be too risky. So the idea that we create this liability shield to protect investors is like a critically important idea. But agency is not compatible with limited liability because if you're my agent, you maximize for me, I'm responsible for what you do. If I send you to the market, say maximize my value by any means necessary, and you stab someone, I'm responsible because I sent you to do whatever it took, right? Like, so liability attaches to agency. That's like an ancient idea that goes back to Roman law. And yet we have said that, oh no, corporations are not independent entities anymore. They are just financial instruments designed for the maximization of investor values. You see it increasingly. We are preaching to directors that they should just find out what the investors want and just do it. And yet as a result, we are putting limited liability at risk, and people wonder, like, why is there all this anti-corporate stuff going on? Why are people agitating for the corporate death penalty? Why are people trying to pierce this liability shield? Because it's absolutely intolerable to have these massive organizations who are acting in this extractive and sociopathic way to the detriment of the public and its communities and their health in so many ways, and then nobody's liable for anything? If you ask the directors, "Why did you do this?" They're like, "Well, I maximize fiduciary duty to my shareholders." You go to the shareholders, like, "Oh, I get limited liability." It's intolerant. It's like an absolutely unstable equilibrium. So, I actually think investors should be the ones leading the charge to get rid of shareholder primacy and return us to a more purposeful idea of incorporation.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one where the kind of abstraction of responsibility almost from the individuals in the structure also can lead to a lot of that behavior. I also wonder what, you know, I'm going to focus on AI because we're on the Chief AI Officer show
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, I'm
we don't
excited.
have too much left in the interview, but that problem operationally could get very bad very quickly when you have a bunch of AI agents that are potentially following like the governance policies of a company and maximizing based on a simple understanding of that. And, like I think the reality of AI agents across a company could have very different outcomes based on a purpose driven company versus a profit maximizing shareholder value type company.
Uh-huh.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, do you see this problem getting infinitely worse with the advent of AI, or is it a human problem, or is it both? Like, what are the tensions there?
Yeah, yeah, well, it's gonna get dramatically worse because it's a human problem. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting. There's AI is in this book, and if you look carefully, if you read this from the lens of an AI practitioner, you will understand why I think this book is incredibly urgently needed right now. I had to be careful because most people are not even like people who are in AI right now have no clue how divorced they are from the general public, even the general public
Mhm.
in business. Most people don't even know what an LLM is, certainly have no clue how it works. And so when we start to talk about agents and LLM agents and even like the possibility of um, emergent intelligence being a source of a living being with its own destiny, its own morality, its own rights. It's like people like find that to be far out. So what I did in the book is I mostly wrote about um I forget who to attribute this idea to, that corporations are slow AIs. And I think it's Ted Chiang who said that most people's fears about AI are just fear about corporations. And every paperclip maximizer thought experiment that people are freaked out about is already happening right now. We already have corporations that are paperclip maximizers, and we had to solve that problem. And interestingly, in software, it's been long understood that the values of the parent organization will be reflected in the technology it creates.
Mhm.
in simple ways, like, there's a famous finding that the, architecture of the software will reflect the organizational chart of the company that makes it. Like, why should that be so? There's no technical reason why, it's a human thing. So, it's very important when we talk about AI alignment, who aligns the aligners? If the organization that is doing the alignment is itself captured by one of these malign ideologies, the software it creates is gonna be super dangerous. So, yeah, the reason why Anthropic is in the book is, because that's, I think, the starting place for, what we need to do in terms of protecting the governance of this technology, going forward.
Yeah, I think there's I want to take like two paths. One is the very operational kind of reality of agents that are operating across an organization with specific governance structures and policies that guide them. The other one is more, I guess, abstract and foundational, which is what you've touched on, which is how the company itself is structured, its governance structure, and how that can influence everything else that falls in place. Anthropic and OpenAI, two prime examples of the differences of those things, right? OpenAI famously kind of like losing its charter. It's kind of like no longer open. It's no longer for the public benefit, like quite explicitly. Anthropic in the news a lot recently for not wanting to be part of autonomous kill chains and doing domestic
Yeah.
mass surveillance of US citizens. OpenAI kind of swooped in, took that contract, said they had the same safeguards as Anthropic. Like it's not clear all of the nuances there. There's a bunch of contract law too that is very interesting to dig into with what
Yeah,
actually
yeah, it's
happened.
complicated.
But what what are those differences? Like, what is Anthropic getting right in your mind? Like, what is the long-term benefit trust, and why do you think it's a better solution, particularly in an age when AI can kind of make these much more exponential problems to all the things that you're talking about?
Yeah, look, I take tremendous comfort in the fact that Anthropic has this structure. Now, can I guarantee that they won't F it up? Like, I have no just to be clear, I don't take any credit for the great work that they've done, and I don't take any responsibility for what happens next because, I was only tangentially involved and, provided them for some advice, but they deserve the credit for having done the hard work of making it happen. If you look at the conflict they've had with the Pentagon is really interesting to me because I want to be super clear. I don't think Anthropic is the main character of this drama. Okay, like the original sin of this whole situation is the United States government and the Department of Defense like doing stuff that is absolutely unprecedented, that is like clearly beyond their statutory authority. And I can't believe people write the story as like two equal parties having a squabble. It's like we're talking about the United States federal government, and this tiny little startup. Like, come on. So, okay. And did Anthropic do everything right or everything wrong? Like, I don't know the details of it. I have no special insider information. But here's to me what's really interesting. Just the bare fact that they were willing to give up a $200 million contract over a point of principle is exceptionally rare in today's business climate. If you talk to young people especially, they feel like all of these companies, law firms, universities, tech everyone's just been capitulating and they don't stand for anything, reversing themselves left and right. And just like these companies, just you can't trust them. So whether Anthropic was right or wrong in some kind of absolute sense to do this or not, I don't think we know enough even we don't even know the details of what happened. So who's to say? But what we can say is it's extremely notable that they did something that they thought was right that cost them this money. That's just that's remarkable. Now, the key to this whole story is they did that without knowing what the consequences would be. As we're recording this, we don't know what the consequences will be. We know that they lost the contract, could be a lot worse. But they've also reaped a whole bunch of benefits that I don't think could possibly have anticipated. Someone sent me a video that day when they made the decision. A group of people had gone to their office and chalked up the sidewalk all around the entrance to their building, thanking them for doing the right thing. Believe me, in San Francisco, that is very rare. That is not the kind of chalkings that tech companies get from people. Claude shot up to number one on the App Store. A lot of people canceled their OpenAI subscription, switched over to Claude. That they couldn't possibly have known that that would happen or that it would be seen that way. In fact, lots of savvy people told them that they were being foolish. A lot of the press coverage was super negative. It was just like grassroots one. I think that we live in such a hyper polarized age that when we use the words right and wrong, people only can understand absolute right and absolute wrong. And I feel this very keenly because I'm an author. My job is to tell these stories. And I pull case studies of companies to illustrate something. And it's interesting, people now, if you name a company in a case study, people assume that what you're saying is that company is, like, perfect. They've never made a mistake, nor will they ever, and therefore, they catch you in a contradiction if they can point to any bad thing that company has ever done. And you're like, "Man, I'm trying to tell you a story about a certain thing that happened this one time. I'm not making any other claim there. Read what it says."
Yeah.
And if I criticize a company, like if I say Google has lost the ethos of don't be evil, people are like, "You're saying Google's the most evil company that ever lived?" I'm like, "No, man. Google's a great company. I said it before. Google's a great company. I'm not criticizing them. I'm just saying this is what their own employees say. Okay? I'm just giving you a fact." And I think what's going on is we no longer can, like, we are having a really hard time understanding that the power, the true strength of a democratic, market-based society is that people are allowed to have different values. It's okay. It's actually really good. That diversity is healthy and a source of strength, and that's true of organizations. Organizations can have different values. Now, my view is every organization should be required to decide for itself what slice of human flourishing is it trying to maximize, and it should have to declare that and then reap the consequences. I find the greenwashing and the people that are bullshitting about this very offensive. But even within that theory, people will have values that I disagree with. And yet I can say that such a company did the right thing anyway. So what does it mean to do the right thing? To do the right thing is to act in a principled way in defense of your own values. You know that old joke that a liberal is someone who won't even take their own side in a fight? Like, we have contempt for that even when it benefits us. So when companies just, like, are flip-flopping left and right, we're just like, "What does this company really stand for? I don't trust them anymore." And even when a company does something we don't agree with, but they did it for a principled reason, we can say, I I trust this company more even though I disagree because I can now predict what they're likely to do in the future. I know that they're not just gonna use self-serving justifications and bad faith arguments to do whatever they want. They're willing to stick to these principles. Now, in the book, I provide numerous stories, but more importantly, evidence, research. There is tremendous evidence that companies that behave in a principled way, that are purpose-driven, that are oriented around the long term, that have a defined mission, that have mission-controlled governance, like each of these elements, we have great evidence that those companies get these massive competitive advantages because such companies are more trustworthy. Trust is the most underrated asset in business today.
I mean, I think that's very true. I think the Anthropic story, to your point, plays that out to some extent, right? Like they had massive benefits, a ton of value was created as a result of that. And I mean, there were also several factors converging, right? There are a lot of investments in product that Anthropic is making that have paid off at the same time that is causing like a sea change to some extent in the AI race. And I think this stance was a huge PR win at like just the right moment for them for that value to kind of compound.
Yep.
But it does pose a very interesting question, and I think to drill down into like the more granular element of having agents running within these companies that might enshrine the principles of the company almost at a fundamental level, because you can very well imagine a world soon, you know, I think anyone that understands LLMs well enough and has experienced them knows how unreliable they can be. Like the hallucinations, the edge
Yeah.
cases, like the jagged frontier of their intelligence, if they are even intelligence in any traditional sense of the word. But they will no doubt be deployed within these companies. And
Yeah.
what are some of the, like, do you have any practical advice for like the companies that are thinking through what governance even means in the next 5 years as they deploy this stuff? What can they do? Like, how do they avoid the worst excesses and enshrine like great operating principles into something that's going to be operating at, near light speed across their company,
Oh, it's so
very, very
dangerous. I think
fast?
people are
Yeah.
being so cavalier with this, and we're already seeing the
Yeah.
incredible liability that they're taking on without realizing it. I mean,
Yeah.
we've already seen examples where like your customer service chatbot like creates massive lawsuits for you because they promise customers things you can't deliver or to misattribute your terms of service. But like we also see consumer chatbots that have like talked people into committing suicide.
Mhm.
No one's really thought through what happens if your customer service bot could talk someone into committing suicide. Right? Like,
Yeah.
it's gonna get really scary. So, first thing is, I think from an operating principle point of view, we have to get our own governance in order. I really do not think people that are operating in this sociopathic, shareholder maximizing, like, do whatever you take to make money. Those people should not be deploying AI agents. It's so dangerous. You can't even imagine the harm you could do because whatever control, I always ask people like, why should I trust you that you're going to do a job? Like, well, we have all these great controls in place. I'm like, okay, but how do those, could I get those controls disabled? No, we would never do that. I'm like, but could you be fired? Well, I guess if my boss was fired, I'm like, okay, well, can he be fired? Can she be fired? Well, but our CEO is really committed. It's like, really? Can the CEO be fired? Oh yeah. Like, who's on your board? Oh, bunch of independents and a bunch of hedge funds. Like, you think they couldn't get those controls removed if they wanted to? We live in a time when people can literally taste it when a private equity firm buys their favorite restaurant. I get that comment all the time from people. Like, I walked in the restaurant, I tasted the food, I was like, "Did something happen?" Like, I've had that experience myself. So many people have that experience. Like, that's so minor compared to what they could do with an AI agent if it's so, like, yeah, get your own governance in order is job number 1. Second thing is we have to explicitly the book is not only about the structural side of governance. This book is also about the operational side of it. In fact, there's as many chapters about the operating side, I think, as the structural side. In fact, I argue in the book that we need to redefine corporate governance to encompass what is currently fragmented across many different areas of study. I think governance should be about purpose, coherence, and integrity, not just legal compliance. So there's a bunch of techniques that we can do to help the organization become mission driven, not just mission hopeful. That's very important. And the last thing is we have to evaluate our vendors on these same criteria. So we get our own governance house in order, but then we have to treat the governance of our vendors as critical. Because like the real question is like, can we trust this vendor? And I see so many companies who make procurement decisions on the basis of like who's got the flashiest marketing, or it's like, oh well, no one ever got fired for using this company. And like these companies have been around only a couple of years. Okay, like there's that argument is not going to hold water. You can't be, well, everyone else is doing it, so we did it too. That's not going to save you. These are novel technologies with novel moral consequences. You got to be a lot more savvy than that. And so trying to find values aligned organizations who are taking governance seriously, I think is super important.
And do you think that that's a feasible task for, someone leading an AI program, let's say a chief AI officer trying to deploy this within their company? One, can they implement that structure in a microcosm? Like, can they try to
Oh
at
yeah,
least
yeah,
implement some guardrails? And
absolutely.
if
Like
they
of
do
course,
that,
like
like, how do
yeah,
they
if you
find
don't
the
have
right
control of the board,
vendors?
obviously
Yeah.
you can't control that, but you can do
Yeah.
you can do what you can do. And within your span of control, you can absolutely do these things. You can establish internal guidelines. You can have whistleblower programs. You can make sure that if something wrong happens, you'll at least find out about it. You can have ways to give customers and partners recourse if something wrong is happening. Of course, you can insist your procurement department. If you don't have dedicated AI procurement standards that include things like governance and how mission driven is the vendor, I really think you're just exposing yourself to tremendous liability. SOC 2 is not going to save you. Okay. The question is like you're putting your customers' private data, their health data through this system, and you've got what kind of guarantee that it won't be abused? Like a lot of these companies, they don't even know if they'll make the guarantee in a contract, sure. They have no idea if the data will leak. Like we're seeing, there's all this evidence, for example, that all these companies, the AI models are advancing against benchmarks faster than they should be, faster than they
Mm.
are improving at real world tasks. How is that possible? Obviously, we're having leakage of the benchmarks themselves in the training data. That's like to me could not be. I have no inside information here, but that it could not be
Yeah,
more
yeah,
obvious to me that there's some
it's
level of
very
happening.
obvious. Yeah.
So if these companies can't even control what's in the training data, what are their promises worth? They have no idea if your private data is gonna be leaked into the training data. They don't know. They're not in control of what's going on here. So, like, what are we doing? Like, I think we have to have much more strong guarantees than just some contract. Even a contract with penalties. Who's gonna pay the penalties? A lot of these companies are making, they have liabilities in excess of their assets by a factor of 10 or 100. Think about all these data center build outs that people have promised but can't afford to pay for. Like, you think your bankrupt in their bankruptcy proceeding, your pathetic, like, liability claim is gonna get you anywhere? Like, you are absolutely dreaming. So, like, yes, not only have governance standards yourself for who you're gonna buy from, but also participate in standard setting. In the book, I talk about the AIUC, the AI underwriting company that's trying to create insurance standards for the AI industry, which I think is a very important initiative. And listen, I'm a equity holder in the company, so I'm talking my own book here. So make your own decisions. But like whether you participate in that standard or not, use the power of standard setting to insist that you, as the collective buyers of this technology, exert some gravitational power over it. And I think that is one of the most pernicious things we see anytime there's a hot technology, everyone's like desperate for a taste of the glory and they want to fly close to the sun. So like whatever the hot company of the moment is, they can mistreat people like crazy. People are just dying to throw money at them. They're dying to be abused. It's just like so sad. It's like, what do you like? You just after the celebrity reflection, what's going on? In a book, I try to explain the psychology behind this behavior. Like, don't chase after some mirage. Really figure out what your own values are and try to be principled in defense of those values. That will always serve you well.
Yeah, I think those are great parting words. I could talk to you about governance and AI probably all day, Eric. So I'll,
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
stop us there. But for our listeners, if they want to learn more about your work, read your book, where should they go?
If you want to read my book, the new book is called Incorruptible. Why good companies go bad and how great companies stay great. You can get copies and learn all about it at incorruptible.co, Incorruptible Co. For those that are reading this close to our release date or listening to this close to our release date of May 26th, there's a whole bunch of bonuses you can get on the website. You can order the book anywhere you want. Just take your receipt, bring it to the website. You can get a free secret chapter of stuff that got cut from the book that I'm pretty excited about. There's a research course where you want to learn about the background and stuff. But more importantly, I think for your listeners, we have a whole bunch of implementation guides for how to do a bunch of the techniques from the book. We're going to do, this will be author Q&A and all kinds of, anyway, a lot of bonuses available if you pre-order or order close to the release date of May 26th. Those bonuses will not going to be available any other place. The book itself is coming out May 26th in hardcover, in ebook form, in audiobook. You can get it absolutely anywhere books are sold, including all the major retailers, however. If you go to the website, the thing I'm most proud of, we have a indie book finder where there's all these indie bookstores that have agreed to cover to carry the book. And if you're going to buy the book anyway, why not buy it at an indie bookstore? Those are important community institutions that support your local community. Why not lend them their support? You're going to buy the book anyway. So we have a way you can find a book there. So anyway, buy the book wherever it's most convenient for you, of course, whatever you want to do. I really appreciate it as an author. For those, if anyone who's listening like found Lean Startup helpful, if I've done anything for you, you want to have a chance to pay it forward. The one thing you can do for me is you can buy this book and help make it a success. I'm very grateful.
Well, Eric, I look forward to the release date. I'm sure our listeners do too. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Take care.